Hello again, everyone. Today, I am going to speak on the topic about the reproduction of organisms and their cells. So, all living things must reproduce in order to pass down the genes to the offspring and continue to ensure the survival of the species. So let's further discuss about the reproduction of organisms. So as you can see, there are two words there, which is the asexual and sexual reproduction. On all living things or all forms of life reproduce through one by or one of two means, which is or which are the asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. So when we say sexual reproduction, um, it occurs when a female gamete or the sex cell unites with a male gamete. The offspring is a genetic combination of the mother and the father. Half of the offspring's chromosomes come from its mother and the other half come from its father. This ensures the offspring are genetically different from their parents and even their siblings. It involves one or only one parent with little or no genetic variation. In the sexual reproduction of all organisms except bacteria, there is one common feature. Haploid uninucleate gametes are produced that join in fertilization to form a diploid uninucleate zygote. In some later stage in the life history of the organism, the chromosome number is again reduced by meiosis to form the next generation of gametes. Some sexual organisms partially revert to the asexual mode by a periodic degeneration of the sexual process. For instance, in aphids and in many higher plants, the egg nucleus can develop into a new individual without fertilization, a kind of asexual reproduction that is called parthenogenesis, which we're about to tackle later. Let's move on to asexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, there is no mating or mixing of genetics. Asexual reproduction results in a clone of the parent, meaning the offspring have identical DNA as the parent. And the asexual reproduction is generally used in less complex species and is quite efficient. Not having to find a mate is advantageous and allows a parent to pass down all of its traits to the next generation. However, without diversity, natural selection cannot work, and if there are no mutations to make more favorable traits, A sexually reproducing species may not be able to survive a changing environment. Another, sexual reproduction only requires a single parent that will pass down all of its genes to the offspring, like what I have said earlier. This means there is no mixing of genes in the offspring. Is actually a clone of the parent or barring any sort of mutations. So there are four types of asexual reproduction. First is the binary fission. I mean, there are five types of asexual reproduction. The first is the binary fission. Almost all prokaryotes undergo a type of sexual reproduction called this binary fission. It is very similar to the process of mitosis in eukaryotes. However, since there is no nucleus, the DNA in a prokaryote is usually just in a single ring. It is not as complex as mitosis. And binary fission starts with a single cell that copies its DNA and then splits into two identical cells. This is a very fast and efficient way for bacteria and similar types of cells to create offspring. However, if a DNA mutation were to occur in the process, this could change the genetics of the offspring and they would no longer be identical clones. So another is budding. Here, another type of sexual reproduction. Budding is when a new organism or the offspring grows off the side of the adult through a part called a bud. The new baby will stay attached to the original adult until it reaches maturity, at which point they break off and become its own independent organism. A single adult can have many buds and many offspring at the same time. Both unicellular organisms like yeast and multicellular organisms like Hydra can undergo budding or this process. Again, the offspring are clones of the parent unless some sort of mutation happens during the copying of the DNA or cell reproduction. And the third one is called the fragmentation. Some species are designed to have many viable parts that can live independently, all found on one individual. These types species can undergo a type of asexual reproduction known as fragmentation. Fragmentation happens when a piece of an individual breaks off and a brand new organism forms around that broken piece. The original organism also regenerates the piece that broke off. The piece may be broken off naturally or could be broken off during an injury or other life-threatening situation. The most well-known species that undergoes fragmentation is the starfish here or the sea star. Sea stars can have any of their five arms broken off and then regenerated into offspring. This is mostly due to their radial symmetry. They have a central nerve ring in the middle that branches out into five rays or arms. Each arm has all the parts necessary to create a whole new individual through fragmentation. The fourth one is the parthenogenesis. The more complex the species, the more likely they are to undergo sexual reproduction as opposed to asexual reproduction. However, there are some complex animals in plants that can reproduce via parthenogenesis when necessary. This is not the preferred method of reproduction for most of these species, but it may become the only way to reproduce for some of them for various reasons. Parthenogenesis is when an offspring comes from an unfertilized egg, lack of available partners, an immediate threat on the female's life, or other such trauma may result in parthenogenesis being necessary to continue the species. This is not a, this is not ideal, of course, because it will only produce females female offspring, since the baby will be a clone of the mother. That will not fix the issue of lack of mates or carrying on the species for an indefinite period of time. And the fifth one is the spores. The spores, many plants and fungi use spores as a means of asexual reproduction. These types of organisms undergo a life cycle called alternation of generations, where they have different parts of their lives in which they are mostly diploid or mostly haploid cells. During the diploid phase, they are called sporophytes and produce diploid spores they use for asexual reproduction. Species that form spores do not need a mate or fertilization to occur in order to produce offspring, just like all other types of asexual reproduction. The offspring of organisms that reproduce using spores are clones of the parent. Examples of organisms that produce spores include mushrooms and ferns. So that's all about the reproduction of organisms and their cells. Let's go back or let's have a recap first before we're going to end up this session. And the sexual reproduction involves only, I mean, asexual reproduction involves only one parent with little or no genetic variation, while sexual reproduction involves two parents who contribute some of their own genetic makeup to the offspring, thus creating a unique genetic being. In addition to the sexual reproduction, mutations can also happen in sexually reproducing species to further add to the diversity of the offspring. The process of meiosis, which creates the gametes used for sexual reproduction, has built in ways to increase diversity as well. This includes crossing over when two chromosomes align near each other and swap segments of DNA. This process ensures the resulting gametes are all different genetically. So that's all for today. Again, I am Jonalyn Felizario from BSN 1B. Thank you for watching and as well as for listening. Thank you.